Chapter 2. Mr. Tompkin, who ran Tompkin's Tools in the High Street, was a canny fellow, but not quite canny enough. If he hadn't found himself suddenly prey to erotic fantasies, he would never have let the beautiful 17-year-old girl in the Gandhi's Hairdryer World Tour 93 T-shirt take one of his nice new electric drills outside to see the colour in the daylight. When she hadn't returned after 15 minutes, he dutifully, if somewhat regretfully, telephoned the police. The line was engaged. A Mr. Michael Minns was on it. Apparently he had returned from a late business lunch with Japanese clients to discover that his assistant had, like the Elvis of old, left the building. But this time, leaving the door unlocked. He was calling to report the loss of 23 expensive guitars, including an original Les Paul Sunburst, valued at around £5,000. "There's no point in just claiming for an old ocarina," his wife had told him. "Go the whole hog, do it in one, and we'll sell up the shop and move to Benidorm." As Mickey was far too pissed to argue, he had agreed. He wrapped the precious guitar in an old caftan and hid it in the wardrobe. "Is this my tank top in here?" he asked. Anna, Tuppe, and Cornelius Murphy sat on a bench in the park. They were sharing the large chocolate cake that Master Bradshaw, the baker's son, had actually allowed Tuppe to take outside to see the colour in the daylight. "I feel," said Tuppe between munchings, "that the seeing the daylight ploy might be subject to the law of diminishing returns. I only outran young Bradshaw by the skin of my teeth." Cornelius dusted chocolate crumbs from his lap. "I don't think we're really cut out for a life of brigandage. We must remember to pay everyone back as soon as we're able." "So, where do we go from here?" Anna licked her fingers. "Back to my house," Cornelius told her. "We'll have to walk, I'm afraid. I had a car, but it got—" "Dumped on," said Tuppe. "From a great height. A crying shame, so it was." "We were tricked," Cornelius explained, by a villain called Arthur Kobold. He employed me to find the missing chapters from a great book. Tuppe and I were almost killed doing so. Come on. Let's go. I'll tell you everything that happened on the way." Anna shrugged. "I'm still not certain I should believe anything you've told me so far." "It's all true." Cornelius stood and stretched. "It is," Tuppe agreed. "There's no plug on that drill, by the way." "Stuff the plug," said Anna. "Tell me again about the booty." "Tell me again about the booty." These words, although spoken at exactly the same moment, came from another mouth altogether. Coincidence? Synchronicity, the chromium-plated megaphone of destiny. The speaker of the words didn't know, neither did he care. All he knew about and all he cared about, above and beyond everything, including the call of duty, absolutely everything, was the science of deduction, the art of detection. And why should it be otherwise? For this man was a detective, and not just any old detective. This man was the detective. This was he of the Harris Tweed three-piece whistle. He of the albino crop and the ivory earring. He of the mirrored pince-nez, the black malacca cane and the heavy pigskin valise. He of the occasional affectation. This was the man, the legend, and the detective, Inspector Hovis of Scotland Yard. The man, the legend, and the detective straddled a single regulation police-issue chair and carefully rephrased his question. "The booty," he boomed in a deep baronial baritone, the voice of one whose social class is scheduled to be the first up against the wall come the revolution. "Tell me about it." Terence Arthur Mulligan, known regularly as the accused, made a surly face at the great detective. "I've told you all I know," he muttered in fluent working class. "Then tell me again." "Look," Terence gripped the edge of the regulation police issue interview table. "I was driving my cab, all right, and I'd just dropped off me fare, right? Old bloke, white hair, looked like Bertrand Russell, right?" "Bertrand Russell." Hovis breathed on the silver pommel of his cane and buffed it with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Bertrand Russell, except he weren't him because he's dead, although I did have him in the back of my cab once. You know what I asked him?" "About the booty." Hovis examined his reflection in his cane's gleaming pommel. It was immaculate, as ever. "No, it weren't about that. I asked him," but the flow of Mulligan's discourse was unexpectedly staunched by the sudden introduction of a polished silver pommel into his gob.
The diamonds.
Inspector Horvis rattled Mulligan's teeth, withdrew the cane and cracked it down on the interview table.
Tell me about the bellied diamonds, and tell me now.
Just you see here. Mulligan fell back, flapping and spluttering.
No.
Hovis rose to loom above him.
Just you. See here. You were pulled in for exceeding the speed limit. When asked to turn out your pockets, what should the arresting officer find but a veritable king's ransom in diamonds? Now, I'm going to ask you just one more time. Where did you get them?
I found them. I was having a cigarette, right? Sitting in my cab, and then there was this bloody big explosion, and this dirty great sort of train thing came steaming out of this building, lights flashing and stuff, and it flew by, right? And then I saw the diamonds. They were lying all over the road, so I scooped them up. I was just driving to the nearest police station to hand them in, when two of your blokes stopped me, right?
Wrong,
said Inspector Horvis. It's the truth, pleaded Mulligan, except for the last bit. I wasn't really taking them to the nearest police station.
No,
said Horvis.
I thought not.
No, said Mulligan. I was going to distribute them amongst the poor and needy. Horvis raised his cane to smite Mr. Mulligan, but thought better of it. There was always the chance that the video camera, supposedly recording the interview, might actually be switched on.
Tell me more about this train,
he said wearily. I only saw it for a moment. It's like a ghost train or something. It made this sound. The great detective lifted a quizzical eyebrow. Yabba dabba doo, said Terence Arthur Mulligan.
Where did you steal those diamonds?
I didn't steal them. Mulligan drummed his fists on the table. How many more times? I found them. They were lying all over the road, just like I told your blokes.
Yet when they drove you back to the scene of this outre occurrence, they could find no broken hoarding, no evidence of any train.
I can't explain that. Mulligan slumped in his chair. But I didn't steal them. I found them. I swear. Horvis shook his head.
No,
said he.
And again, no. I put it to you that you are telling me a dirty great pack of lies, spinning me the crumb repetition.
What is that, by the way?
The crumb repetition, the warmed-up cabbage, the old story.
Oh, said Terence.
That.
Inspector Horvis removed his mirrored pince-nez and fixed Mulligan with a baleful stare.
I regret to inform you, sir, that you are, as we say in the trade, banged to rights, in the frame and up to the swanny, flagrante delicto, or as near as makes no odds.
I want to see my brief, growled Terence, who knew his rights.
And so you shall,
replied Inspector Horvis, who knew them also.
But you are going down this time, chummy. There's bird in this for you. Your goose is cooked.
Your goose is cooked, dear, called the mother of Cornelius Murphy to the adoptive father thereof. Her words travelled through the open kitchen door of the family home, down the length of the back garden, and fell upon the intended ears of her large and sorry-looking spouse. Jack Murphy sat in the doorway of his shed, the very picture of despair. His wig was off, and his great head was down. A multiplicity of chins rested upon his bee-fair-eyed chest. The bee-patched elbows of his shirt rested upon the bee-patched knees of his corduroy trews. His hooded eyes were fixed upon the dud check that he held between prodigious fingers. The once merry mouth was turned down at the corners, and a low murmur arose from it as a rumble of distant thunder.
Woe unto the heir, Sir Murphy,
mumbled this rumble,
for lo it has become undone.
The daddy held up the cheque and let the late afternoon sun play upon its evil edges. 12 hours before it had read, Pay Jack Murphy the sum of £5,000, signed Arthur Corbould, but no longer. When he had presented it to the bank, a terrible transformation had occurred. The words of joy had vanished away, to be replaced by those which glowed there still. Pay this fat fool 100 laughs, then kick him into the street. The junior bank clerk had been pleased to do so. Your son was in here earlier with one face. He smirked. The elder Murphy scowled at the rogue cheque. It'd been done. His son had been done. Corbould had stitched them up like a pair of the proverbials. It was too much to bear. Are you coming in to eat this goose? Called his wife. The cat's already had 2 of its legs. You best hurry before it gets the others. Inspector Horvis returned to his office. It was a long haul from the interview rooms of Scotland Yard, but he knew the way well enough by now. He strode down a corridor, marched up a staircase, strutted along a passageway, strolled through the typing pool, sauntered past the forensic labs, and plodded down a back stairway, stumbled through a fire exit, and finally staggered across the car park to the porter cabin. The porter cabin! Hovis gazed up at the abomination and chewed at his lower lip, and the same evil thoughts entered his mind as ever they had done for the past 23 days, the days that he had been exiled here, and the same name came once more to his lips, the name that he loathed and despised with every natural fibre of his expensively clad being, the name of Brian Bulwer Lytton. Chief Inspector Lytton, the new broom that was sweeping clean the department, and a fresh young broom he was, 10 years the junior of Hovis, and an influential broom also, one which held sway with those of the high echelon, one which had had Hovis temporarily relocated, and who now occupied his former office in a manner that seemed anything but temporary.
Lytton.
Inspector Hovis uttered the name as the profanity was, and turning momentarily from the prefabricated door of the porter cabin, he raised a defiant fist toward the distant window of his erstwhile domain.
"I'll be back,"
said he. He didn't see the flutter of the Venetian blinds, nor the satisfied smile on the face of Brian Bulwer Lytton as he fluttered them, which was probably all for the best, really. The temporarily relocated detective pressed open the prefabricated door and entered the disagreeable confines of his new abode. They were crowded, very crowded. Elderly filing cabinets flanked the cabin, standing where the removal men had left them, their drawed faces to the walls as if in disgrace. Files once impeccably indexed were now piled in unmarked boxes, cartons and crates, along with the inspector's personal effects, his pictures, commonplace books, fencing trophies, awards for bravery, bits and bobs and fixtures and fittings. But where was his desk? Where his precious Louis XV ormula-mounted Kingswood and parquetry knee-hole desk, with its painted leather-lined top and its channelled border, with its knee-hole flanked by drawers with rococo handles and ram's mask escutcheons, the desk presented to him by the Royal House of Windsor, in gratitude for his sensitive handling of a tricky little matter concerning an heir to the throne, a homeopathist called Junkie, and a dormobile named Desire. Where that? Still in his old office, that was where. Too large to get into the porter cabin, and now commandeered by Chief Inspector Brian Bloody Lytton. Hovis glowered about his temporary accommodation, regarding it with a face of foul contempt, taking in its each and every hideous detail before releasing his pent-up fury in a silent primal scream. This done, he straightened his regimental necktie, placed his cane by the door, removed his pince-nez, folded them into a sleek tortoiseshell case, and slipped this into his top pocket, and then he smiled upon his second-in-command. His second-in-command smiled back at him from her place behind the knackered trestle table, which now served both she and Hovis as a desk. Her name was Polly Gotting. She was Anna Gotting's twin sister, and she was the inspector's new second-in-command. His old second-in-command of 10 years standing reliable Ron Sturdy had been temporarily relocated, and although Polly was quick on the uptake, willing, eager and helpful, and possessed of an IQ in excess of reliable Ron's, she just wasn't the same. "Any joy?" Polly asked.
"Joy."
Hovis had almost forgotten the meaning of the word.
"Joy."
"With Mulligan. Did he respond positively to questioning?"
"No."
Hovis negotiated his way between the boxes, cartons and crates.
"He remains adamant. A train emerged from nowhere and showered the street with diamonds. He just picked them up."
"You'll have to let him go, then."
"I know."
Hovis sank onto a cardboard box. Something valuable within fractured with an alarming crack. The inspector was deaf to the sound.
"Have you rechecked all the witnesses' statements?"
"The independent witnesses, yes. There were a lot of reports. Some kind of weird train. 3 people have come forward to say they saw a taxi driver picking up what looked like diamonds after it passed by."
"A curious business."
Inspector Hovis rapped a brisk tattoo on the prefabricated floor with the heels of his hand-stitched brogues.
"Something happened last night. Something momentous. Half the force out in pursuit of a spiky Volkswagen. A ward full of chase casualties. A train from nowhere and a cache of diamonds. Did you check on the diamonds? Was I right?"
"You were right." Polly passed papers. The inspector inspected them. Amazingly, they were still on record.
I knew it.
Hovis scanned the papers, nodding all the while. But how did you know? How could you possibly recognise the cut of diamonds stolen before you were even born?
The great unsolveds.
Horvis returned the papers, then tapped the port side of his skull.
All in here. They are the staff of life to me. There is crime, and there is classic crime. I have it within me to solve the crime of the century. It's my destiny. I know it, and I will fulfill it. When I saw Mulligan's diamonds, my heart rose. I recognized them immediately to be part of the lost Godolphin hoard. If those diamonds had not been stolen in 1914, it is probable that the First World War might never have taken place.
Really? Polly shook her head. I always thought that the war was precipitated by the assassination of Austria's Crown Prince, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir apparent to Emperor Franz Joseph I at Sarajevo on 28th June 1914.
Did you indeed?
Horvis examined his fingernails. They were immaculate, as ever.
Then let me tell you this. History is rarely written up by those who actually make it.
Oh, I do so agree. As Gibbon remarked in The Decline and Fall, Chapter 3, history is indeed little more than a register of the crimes, follies and misfortunes of mankind.
Quite so,
said Inspector Horvis. And wasn't it Napoleon who wrote, "What is history but a fable agreed upon"?
I believe it was,
said Inspector Horvis. And Sir Robert Walpole, "All history is a lie," he said.
Polly,
said Inspector Horvis. Yes, sir?
Put the kettle on.
Polly smiled once more at Inspector Horvis. First up against the wall come the revolution, she thought.